Hi, my name's Nick Sayers. I'm an artist from Brighton, and I normally come to these things and give talks about my artwork, and there's a little bit of shameless promotion inside this, but not actually as much as I've managed to, I thought I might squeeze in. So this is actually about from bike to car, my journey from naked cyclist to mature driver. So I only have been driving with a driving licence and fully legal for a year and a half. And I'm 50. So this is about the journey that I went on to get to this point. I even drove here. Before that, a cat-based preamble. So when I was renting my last place in Hove, and we didn't have access to the garden. That was our downstairs neighbour, and but we became owners of a cat. So I thought I'd make a lovely catio and a sort of cat ramp for our cat to go down to poo in the neighbour's garden. So I took several weeks making this thing, and little Ollie was terrified of it. And he would just sit on the edge like this. Anyway, I'm going to move on from this story. So I grew up in the 70s, and I'd just like you to take a minute to appreciate my mother's fair old knitwear that she and here's me on my, I guess my first bike. I don't actually remember the one, but I think I learned on a rally budgie when I was about 8 without the training wheels. But when I asked my parents to find a picture of me on a bike, they also found this. So technically, and this was I think from like a year or two earlier, so technically I probably was in a car before I was on a bike. But growing up in Canterbury, in Kent, you can see the cathedral there in the distance, and the beautiful city walls. And then sometime in the 60s, town planners thought it'd be a brilliant idea to put a massive car park around the city walls and a 30-mile-an-hour road alongside it with a hairpin bend. And so my experience of walking into town as a teenager was crossing this horrible thing to get to like somewhere that's objectively beautiful. So it kind of put me off cars quite early on in my life, strangely. I guess went through my 20s and 30s and 40s doing a lot of cycling. Like I went on cycle tours. This is like all photos from a tour around Cornwall with my ex on a really ancient camera phone. I also, as an artist, this is the one bit of shameless self-promotion. I make drawing machines out of bicycles. So this on the right is one of me with a bicycle styrograph. And before I learned how to drive, I worked out all sorts of ingenious ways of taking my machine. So this is a body drawing machine inside that tube onto public transport. And I've got a massive backpack on my back and a little backpack on my front. And I got the most bizarre looks carrying this thing onto trains. I have to say, they all thought it was like a bazooka or a sort of like a sort of hazardous gas canister or something like that. A lot of this sort of anti-car sort of sentiment, I suppose, and sort of pro-cycling led to me getting really into activism, like transport activism. One of them was Critical Mass, we might have seen, which is like a sort of monthly ride around cities in London and sort of big cities. It's big in America as well, where it's quite sort of anarchic, like a bunch of cyclists will cycle around and just sort of flock and enjoy the safety of cycling together. I should mention actually I'm not particularly, I mean I am an environmentalist, but my main thing is I'm an urbanist. I just think making streets and roads in city centres safer and nicer for humans to walk and cycle is just much nicer than having cars just everywhere and being able to drive and park your car wherever you like. I also got involved in the Alliance Against Urban 4x4s. So I made these parking tickets for Brighton and Hove and Manchester councils to sort of just raise awareness that the massive tractor that you drive into Chelsea is completely unnecessary and dangerous for small children. So those things were quite sort of, I guess, adversarial. But then I heard about the Naked Bike Ride, and I went on the 2005 one and thought, why is this not in Brighton? This has got Brighton's name written all over it. So I made it my life's mission to start the Naked Bike Ride in 2006 in Brighton, and here I am actually still in London on the Mall. One of my favourite moments of the whole thing. But what was really nice is just like people's, the priceless thing about it was seeing people's response to it. It was this sort of crazy mixture of sort of disbelief, shock, joy, and it's quite life-changing. And I think partly what used to annoy me sometimes was people would sort of come up to sort of get in touch and say, oh, I'm going to drive down from Manchester to go on the Brighton Naked Bike Ride. Where can I park my car so that I can drive back up again? And it used to really annoy me, and I could sort of go under my, it's like through gritted teeth, I'd tell them. Eventually I just worked out, if they have one amazing experience in the year where they cycle naked through a city centre, I think our work is done. Like it's just rather than being a bunch of sort of worthy people with placards going, this is a thing, and people looking on just solemnly. It's just a joyful thing. So, in 2017, I moved to the suburbs. Oh, actually, I did manage to get another piece of shameless self-promotion. This is my lockdown portrait project. I got photographed by a press photographer on my street, like a sort of, it's basically a sort of car-dependent urban sprawl suburb. And so I realised I'd probably have to learn to drive. So I found this lovely guy, Ahmed, who became my teacher for what he says was his longest student session ever. I think I did over 100 hours and it took 3.5 years of regular lessons. And it's kind of weird because like I use like sort of like power tools and sort of pillar drills and like bandsaws all the time. So I'm quite, you know, I'm an artist, so I've got good hand-eye coordination. But I don't know what, it just took me ages to get my head around. I've never, I mean, like in 2018, I'd never sat behind the wheel of a car. And this was sort of, you know, then lockdown happened, and we had these amazing things happen. Like we had like whole lanes set aside for cycling, and there was like very few people on the roads. You could hear sort of all the traffic noise had gone. You could hear bird song. It was like, oh my god, my work here is done. Like overnight. My transport activism has come to pass, and we had this beautiful sort of segregated, safe cycle lanes. Unfortunately, there was a massive kickback from people who couldn't get to work in the 5 minutes longer than it would normally take them. Again, I guess car driving is kind of joyless when you've done it all your life. Oops. But sort of halfway through this sort of experience with Ahmed, these 100 hours, I realised I was going to have to give up something really important that's like almost defined my identity. Is I'm no longer a non-driver, which had sort of defined my life for all that time. And one of the things he had to tell me off about was when I looked behind me, I'd rather than look in the mirror, I'd sort of raise, like, it was a cyclist look, sort of over my shoulders to see if there was cars coming behind me. Again, this thing during the pandemic, I sort of went online to book my driving test and ended up with this. This is how far in the queue I was. do you remember that? Like, there's so many amazing how many things from lockdown are completely forgotten about. Like DIY shops had like a waiting list for their website, and again it was the case with this. So I set this to just go, and I sort of came back to it. And I think it took 6 hours to get to the head of the queue, and because it'd taken so long, and because I'd sort of failed my first version test just before lockdown, and because it was such a rigmarole to get to the second test, I was like, I am not going to fail this. So I got various different friends to sort of do like practice runs in the sort of weeks leading up to the test, and I passed. Yay! So this was 20th of August 2021. I passed. My driving instructor told me not to put one of these tags on my thing. He said it's a prick tag. Don't be a prick. And so here's my cat Ollie. Like a month or two after I built this whole ramp system, the neighbour said, "Oh, he was down the ramp the other day. He saw a girl cat." 4 days after I passed my test, I met a lovely lady, and we had a sort of long-distance relationship in Northampton. So I've got a lot of driving practice in. Just thought I'd throw in a few film references here. This is the Pink Panther, shot in the dark. It's Peter Sellers is on the run from the Inspector Dreyfus, that's it. And of course, they're in a naturist colony, and so he gets in the car with Maria Elka Sommer, and they're driving naked through a French town when they got taken up by the gendarmes. Anyway, I reenacted this scene on the way back from the sauna last summer. Another thing, so this is Widnail and I don't know if you know the scene where they're late for something, and he's speeding down the motorway, and he goes, "You're speeding," and he says, "I'm making time." And I guess it sort of brings up two things for me, which is, first of all, I sort of miss having cycling everywhere, because I'd sort of see skips and I'd sort of dive into them and find things, or sort of I'd stop and look at sort of nice flowers by the side of the road. With driving, you've got to pay attention, and actually Google SatNav is pretty accurate for me, whereas when it was cycling, I'd always had to add about half an hour for sort of jumping into skips and stuff. Yeah, it definitely gives you a different sort of appreciation of time driving. I just wanted to talk about the things I've learned as an actual driver, and the main one is entitlement. So inside cars, you're safe, you can control your sounds, you can control your climate, you're in your own little bubble, and you're isolated from the outside world. If you're outside a car, which I was most of my life, the things that I get from cars are these things. They're dangerous, there's noise, and that's the thing that's, as well as, actual pollution, there's noise pollution coming off these things, exhaust fumes, it's stressful, and this was squeezed out into the margins by cars and by car infrastructure. Another thing I learnt is these are the highway code symbols, but it seems to be, like, in actual life, these are just a rough guideline. You can just, if you're late for a meeting, you can ignore these, or if you drive a BMW or an electric car or whatever, you can just ignore these. But then you can also get really pissed off if you're caught speeding and you're sent a ticket. It's just the government trying to make money out of you. Not that speeding kills children or those sorts of things. So these are the actual speed limit. Oop. Alrighty. Another thing that really foils my is idling. Like people just pull up on the curb and just leave their motor running, or sort of stop at lights and wait for several minutes, or cross level crossings and just leave their motor running with sort of exhaust guffing out the back and noise. Pavement parking. People think because they pay road tax, which doesn't exist, they can pay parking. They're paying pavement tax as well at the same time. So a sort of slogan from my activist days in critical maths were, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. I guess the lesson I learned, and I sort of quite enjoyed driving for that reason, is I'm not stuck in this traffic jam, I'm participating in the traffic jam. I am the traffic jam. So a few things looking forward to the future. We've got self-driving cars, the Johnny Cab of the Google world. So this is what like a sort of standard British motorway looks like with conventional cars. It's kind of like a mock-up of what things might look like with electric cars. Oops. And here's the same thing with self-driving cars. So these things might add a little bit to the environment, but they do bugger all for everything else. So they're still as dangerous, and they're still as congesting and polluting. So yes, I kind of want to unlearn to drive in some ways. One of which is to just, when I am driving, I don't idle my car ever. I'm one of these annoying people who gets pulled up at lights and turns my engine off. Yeah, that's doing a little bit for sort of not just spewing out exhaust all everywhere. Sorry, I don't know what this is. Here's my bumper sticker. But I kind of want to get back into, because I've had a bit of a honeymoon period of like driving, where it's like, oh, it's practice. But I've been trying, wherever it's a journey that doesn't need a car, to cycle or walk or use public transport instead. And I've been involved in this campaign to reinstate the bike lane that was ripped out after COVID. And so these are the kids that are going to be able to take their test when they're 17. And if they don't see like a good and safe way of driving, of cycling, or using other modes of transport, they're just going to get in a car, and because it's just way more easy to drive than it is to cycle. So we need to do. Sounds cheesy, but like we need to do something for the next generation of potential drivers. And I'm back to the Naked Bike Ride. So this is the post COVID bike ride that we had.
Nice one,
Yeah, well, this is covered by the flagpole. Oops. Sorry. That turned out to be a bit more ranty than I intended, but there you go. Cheers.